It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. It's been a while since we've had a speaker, but Phil put his hand up and said he'd love to do a talk, and this one's quite an exciting one. So I'm going to hand over to Phil, who's going to talk about the Planemaker's planes. You didn't really give me much description to it, so it's
meant to be intriguing.
One. Yeah,
I'll drum up the audience, being intriguing.
Over to Phil.
If we're all sitting comfortably, share screen. Okay. Hopefully you'll see that. Anyone? Good.
Yeah.
Fine. Right. As Shanik said, I'm the act tonight. Tonight's entertainment is going to be a story about a tool chest and a few related points. So let's explain what's going on. This tool chest came to me about 20 years ago from my father-in-law. He rescued it from the family business. It's not his line of work at all, but he's just saved it from getting thrown away. And he had it for a while. And since then, it kind of sat in my spare room for a while, and I started digging into it and trying to understand more of what it was about. So, for context, it's a tool chest from about 1880. I think I know something of its owners. It's come through a few generations of my wife's family. So it's not me, it doesn't tell me who I am. I'm not the heir to the company millions, nor she, unfortunately. And in going through this, going through the family, going through some scrapbook type information we've got on the business and what it did and where it was used, I've just been intrigued by the connections that have been made and the things that have made sense to me. Some of that's come actually through Bench Talk, discussing tools, and I can recognise some tools here that are specific to pattern makers, and it makes sense. Some of those things are, as I said, from that scrapbook from the lines of business, you can see, okay, that's what they were doing, and that's how that sort of tool would get used. What I want to do tonight is go through three stages. Let's have a quick look at the chest and the contents, so you know what we're talking about. I don't plan to dwell on that too much. If anything catches your eye, and Shrenik will say this as well, if there's any questions, please put them in the comments or the chat, and I will definitely get back to that. I'm happy to, when the chest is right here, we can take a camera into that, you can have a look at that as well. I've got time, we can keep going, but please put comments in there. Having given you a look, I want to explain where it came from, and that's, again, some connections were made for me in doing some research on this, and it's interesting. It certainly is interesting to me. And then, lastly, let me show you some of the things that I know that business did. The business grew, it kind of broadened from pure pattern making, but you'll see some things. I trust you will find some of that interesting. I certainly did. So, interesting, hopefully entertaining, hopefully you may be able to tell me something. I may learn something as well. A couple of points on this. As I said before, it's not my family, so you know, I'm just observing this myself. The other thing is, obviously, it's a tool chest. It's contemporary-ish with the Warrington chest, but you can see by looking at it, it's not the Warrington chest. And this presentation is in no way the work that Ted and Andy and others did. I'm not pretending to be anything like that. This is just me on my own having a look at something in the spare room. Okay. Moving on. So first pass through what's in the tool chest. It is a chest. It's got the right number of corners. It's pretty basic though. It's pretty beaten up. It's had no restoration from me. It's got some decent construction to it. It's held together for 140 years, so yeah, it's got something going for it. But this lid will show you the first. There's a bit of a theme and a symptom going here. It's not full. It's missing quite a few things. And basically it's missing the things that are saws, regular chisels, mostly regular planes, i.e. straight, flat things that you would use normally. And there's probably a few reasons for that that may come out through the story, but if nothing else, 60 years of being in someone's garage and being pilfered for DIY could explain some of that. But it's interesting evidence to me as well. I can still see where things were. But it's not about the chest itself, it's more about Or go press the mouse button. Cool. Yeah. There we go, good. Let me break down what's in there. Very basic. In-canal, out-canal gouges, a number of, whether that represents a full Planemaker suite, I can't say. The thing that did surprise me though was just a number of small carving tools, particularly swan neck, spoon bits possibly. I don't know how you describe some of those. Seem to be quite heavy on those. This isn't necessarily how it started, it's how it ended. So whatever the business went through, this is what they ended up with. Well, maybe come back to that if someone spots something obvious. If I click across the tills, I can find some conventional tools, things that you might recognise, and I might still attempt to use. There's a bunch of saw files. There is a very intriguing scraper made out of a file. So the teeth have been taken off, and it's got a slight taper to it, but it doesn't look like a useful scraper to me. I thought it might be a cut-off tool for a lathe, but it's not tapered in that direction either, so that's a question for me for later. I'd like to ask the panel on that. Spoke shave, big sticker. There's one only twist bit. There's a thread box and tap. And there's another mystery object at the bottom. It looks a bit like a gouge, but it's mushroomed, it's been hit. It hasn't handled, it's that block of metal. I want to bring that out later as well and ask people what that might be. Curving saw blade, just for completeness of the audit. It's there, but nothing to say about that. Some interest in the marking tools, the layout. We're big on big micrometers in this box. They're quite chunky. There's quite a few, I think, depth gauges. There's a broken marking gauge, standard stuff. There's a saddle square with a, not just a 45 degree, but other angles marked on it too. Steel rule, combo square, or at least a combo center finder. And at the bottom, this is one of those connections I spoke about. Having found out a bit more what pattern makers do, I went looking for a pattern maker's contraction ruler, and that's what this is. So it's got contraction scales for brass and iron on. Some of you would recognise that. I've got a question on that one later as well. And the fact it's made by iGreen in Pimlico will become relevant. So that's it for there. Taking the tills out, looking into the lower compartments. Not revolutionary, but just for completeness, let me show you. There's a long compartment at the back with, that's a triplane. I'll get that out in a minute. There's a number of hollows and rounds at the front. There's a core box set on the right there. And look at these. That is a half set of evens, if I have my terms right. So it goes from 2 to 18. There we go. Some of these are back in use. I've got these working. Some of you will have seen me using those on the bench talk class last year. And that is 22 inches long. I'm calling it a triplane. So there. We could argue the case on that. Could be a jointer, but I think it's a triplane. And it's a pattern maker's chest, so it should have some of these, and it has. 5 interchangeable bases on that core box plane, only 2 stamped with 3s and 5s. Only 2 irons, so either through the years it's been used, worn out, lost. I don't think it would have been particularly useful for DIY, so they may not have been there when my father-in-law got hold of it anyway. When you take the core box till out, you look below and you find this. And there's some interest in that. I will get those out for you next, but have a look at that compartment as well. It's got a piece below it. Now these, to be honest, the router was the first thing I went for, because years ago when I was getting more into woodworking, hand tool woodworking, as they still are, Stanley 71s were quite hard to come by. So I started using this, and I had to make it a blade because that one there shown is worn down to a nub. So I ground down an Allen key, got that working. But what I noticed was, and what I think I also learned from other pattern making sources, was it looks awfully like a home cast pattern maker's job, where they've copied one, they've got connections in casting, And to be honest, due to lack of stamps or anything on that chariot plane, I wonder if that came through the same route as well. But that's, again, I've got it here. We can get that out in a minute. Have a good look. A couple of very small potential core box planes, one stamped 2.5, the other one's not stamped at all. Made in 2 pieces, as were the other core box planes. Perhaps not the fanciest, poshest planes on the market. May even have been user-made, don't know. Keeping going. Now, back below those, I mentioned the hidden tier. You see that at the very bottom. If you've got fingernails, you can just about get it out. And I thought I'd found the world's first occurrence of alfie shine, but it's not. I think that's the first aid kit. All I'll say is, if you were injured, I hope someone else was there to help you get to the bottom of the box to get the ointment out, because I wouldn't fancy it myself. Now, this looks a bit more bench talky, doesn't it? Quick summary. And the stamps and provenance are relevant to the story. So that big triplane and all the moulders, the hollows and rounds, are Varvel & Sons, Ebor Works, York, which I found in Google. Not unusual. About right for the time period I'm talking about. And also, if I squint hard, I can just about make out Thomas Underwood, tool dealer, Bradford. And if I Google that, I found the unimpeachable source of Andy T on UK Workshop, confirming, yep, they were there at that time. Bradford's a reasonable place for those to have been bought. We'll explain the family where they were, but that's definitely the right sort of region for them. Question for later. 2 spare irons kicking around in the box. One is Monk, with no other information. That's a new one on me. And the other was A House, Clapham Junction, which, like the Pimlico point earlier, is also relevant to the story. I just found another iron as well, which is Millard of Kentish Town Road. So there's still quite a strong London connection there. Gouges, mix of marbles, Sorby, there's a ward there somewhere. But there you go. Selection of stamps, that's where these tools have come from. That's the tools that are in use. And that's, I want to move away from the tools for now, because it's all very well. We like tools, we talk about tools, we talk about stamps, we talk about where things have come from. But this section is really, this impressed me, surprised me, basically because of the difference that a bit of education, a bit of opportunity, and some skills made to people's lives. So I want to show you the Carter family tree, because it's the Carters. That's the line that this came through. That's my wife. And if I start with George Carter there, we're talking about the 1860s, 70s, 80s. That's the period I'll be interested in. He hadn't been subsumed entirely by the Industrial Revolution. He was working as a tailor. His wife is also listed later in the census as working with him as a tailor. They're not in the Industrial Revolution bringing up a family, but what they are is, I think, paying for their children or supporting their children through enough education to actually get a bit of a leg up. So when we start seeing Herbert, Herbert's relevant to this story. He's the H. Carter I mentioned before. He's the H. Carter of the stamps you saw. He is listed on census as a scholar to the age of, I think, 15. That's not bad. And then becomes a worsted mill hand. So he's working on looms in the woolen mills up north. Haley Hill, as it said, is Halifax, up north of England. His older brother is already a power loom overlooker. That sounds supervisory to me, almost management. And something's happened to Herbert in the 10 years between 71 and 81, because the next time I find him, he's in London. He's already called a pattern maker. He's boarding with other pattern makers, a French polisher, people from Glasgow and Manchester, all sorts. And by definition, a pattern maker by that point must have tools, because pattern makers have to provide their own tools. And that's why it ties back nicely to that Bradford Underwood dealer, to the Ebor Works, York, etc. It sort of helps. And this is the sort of conversation I've had back with members of the family, and it sort of made sense. Oh yeah, Herbert came from there. So the chest starts with him. By 1882, Herbert is married, has his first son, and his kids are born in Pimlico and Battersea in London. They are listed later in the census as steam engine pattern makers. They followed Dad into the same line of work. And H. Carter actually becomes an incorporated company from 1908. Now, Bert, the older child, goes a bit off the straight and narrow, not in a bad way. But he worked as a chauffeur, a mechanic, an engineer before World War I. He drove ambulances there. He came back to the company afterwards. The general feeling in the company, in the family, is had he stayed with the chauffeuring and mechanicking, he would have done far better because that was a growing trend. But either way, Wilf's the core. Wilf's the one we'll talk about next. He's the skilled pattern maker and woodworker and ran the business for longest. And for completeness, Dr. John Carter down there, it's relevant to think about progression and family and where it enables you to be. He's an academic, or he was. He died around 12 years ago. He's the one that saved the chest for us. So thanks to John, we're here tonight. Not in trade, no particular practical skills, a bit of Sunday DIY, but an academic. And he got to go to university because he could be funded by George and Nora, his parents. George died fairly early as well, so Nora was supporting him through university. Quick relay on that. 1871, Herbert, young lad. We have to guess how he went from being a mill hand to a pattern maker. But, you know, young, bright, intelligent, we hope, educated, possibly, gets through his time as a mill hand without losing any significant fingers, maybe gets involved in maintenance and engineering, maybe gets talking to pattern makers who are on the premises. Pattern makers, there was no school for pattern makers, they could have come from somewhere. And he definitely bought some tools there. For those of you who don't have the privilege, dubious privilege of being British, to explain, Halifax is up there. So where that red dot is, Haley Hill, north of England up there, I'm up in Glasgow, as is Scott. We're going to head down to London shortly. 1881, I said, he was in Pimlico, London, with other tradesmen, listed as a pattern maker for engines in the census, soon as his sons. This is worth a look, actually. So if I can, I'm hoping you can see my mouse, but top right, you see Pimlico. Down a bit, you see Battersea. So Wilf was born somewhere in Battersea. Wandsworth down here. That will become relevant to the story. And Clapham. We saw a plane iron made in Clapham. So this sort of southwest London seems to be very much the focus of the rest of their lives. That's where, not far from where my wife's family are now, so it made quite a big shift in terms of where that family is based. Moving on, a bit of a gap in the timeline there, but by 1901, those guys are both in the business as well. I mentioned Bert was more of a mechanic. He's listed as a steam engine fitter, so that's sort of consistent with going away from pattern making more into engineering. They've got their paws on the tools, and 1908, H. Carter starts up as a business. And we'll come back to that timeline. And that's really all I wanted to cover in terms of the family, the timeline. But again, it's just those connections of saying, okay, they started here. I can see the tools were probably bought there. He's a pattern maker. He must have these tools. And then going through, either things got superseded, broken, replaced. I started to see some of the London stamps, some of the London tool dealers as well. Now, this is where we get into sort of applied genealogy. So given those tools, given the skills, given the background, they show the sorts of things they do. There's at least one Andy on here, we'll need him. I'm struggling to know what that thing does, but it's here because it's in the family scrapbook. And it's there as a bit of core business. It was a nice little learner. So it's a gas condensate pump coupled with the AT power takeoff unit. And while that was under the Alan Taylor name, I think the story is that they got involved in design as well. I don't think this was 1908. This was probably 1930-ish. And that was a core bit of business. The best thing I can see from that picture is it looks like the way of connecting a gas pump to a vehicle transmission for building, potentially, a gas truck. So You drive around the streets with your tank full of gas condensate, recharging, for instance, gas lights. When I first saw this picture, I thought, wow, the Reading Gas Company, not the world famous Reading Gas Company. But actually nowadays, thinking about it, it's about time you rebooted the giant untapped Reading gas fields. It might solve a bit of a problem. Seriously though, Reading did actually have a very early, I think 1820, street gas lighting program or industry going ahead. So what we saw in the previous advert very briefly is just, this is already in use with many gas companies and other business firms. So there was a good market for this, and it's pretty unsexy, but it's just good business fodder. If anyone has a better idea later of how that damn thing works and what it does, I'd be fascinated. Moving on. No, I hope this level of nudity at this time of night is acceptable for the bench talk standards. What was going on here was the Harrison Telescope Company still exists. I don't know if Jim's on anywhere. He's not really joining us that much, but he may know of it as well. This was their involvement in those beachside, end of the pier, beauty spot, coin-operated telescopes. And considering their line of work, that gave them quite a bit of scope, because if you've ever used one, it's a very heavy metal casting. It needs pretty accurate machining of parts, which we think is where Bert came in. And actually the whole thing is surrounded by a wooden podium at the bottom to stand on. Now, why they don't make it shorter, I don't know, but between those three, that gave quite a few things for the company to do. We're quite proud of that one. I do want to read you something, because I can just find it. There's a very small caption below the bathing lovelies there, you can see. And that caption down there says, their outlook is through a telescope at Hastings Beach, but we think this view is the most charming one around. So it shows newspapers don't really change much, do they? H. Carter and Sons, the letterhead. Again, it's one of those connections for me going through. Okay, model maker. What does that mean? Ah, right. If I now understand model maker to be synonymous pretty much with pattern making, then that all ties up. That makes sense as well. Mechanical engineering, turners and machinists. I'll tell you that speaking to a cousin who was born just before the workshop shut down and took the SEED, she describes it as very large, dark, and full of big machines and lots of canvas belts. So I think this business turned into quite a big undertaking. They only about the three of them working there though, so between them, they were kind of spreading themselves quite thin. Enough of that. And on to, now this is one of those things you find and you just stop and you read it again and again and again. And it starts to make connections and you start, bloody hell, what's going on here? Let me read you this letter. Then I'll explain some more about the pictures and the membership card. What it says is 2nd of February 1911, from Balloon Factory Farnborough to H. Carter and Sons, Engineers, Wandsworth. Dear Sirs, as I have today smashed my propeller and have not a spare one, I am very urgently in need of the one you are making for me. Please therefore hurry it up and let me have it as soon as possible. If it turns out satisfactorily, it's quite possible that further orders will come your way. Yours faithfully, Geoffrey de Havilland. So that H. Carter company, Wilf in particular, only a few years after they incorporated the company, and importantly, not that long after Wilbur and Orville chucked it down the field, as Jim said. When I first read that letter, I put it in a silly posh voice, and I thought Geoffrey just having on. But having read about him as well, I'm actually quite impressed by Geoffrey de Havilland. He was from privileged stock. He went to Oxford, I think. But having come back from Oxford, he then went to the Crystal Palace School of Engineering for 3 years. He apprenticed himself as a draftsman for a year. He then worked for the Wolseley Motor Company. And it was only in 1909 that he himself committed fully to aero engineering, whether he just packed it in and went off to do his own thing as an entrepreneur. That might explain some of what's coming up next. The balloon factory, I believe, looking at Wikipedia, then became the Royal Aircraft Factory. So there's just connections coming left, right, and centre to read this stuff. And this is just from one page in Auntie Dorothy's scrapbook. Wilf, though, so this is second generation out of Haley Hill. He seems to, I thought when I first saw this letter, he's made a propeller, he's tagged along on Jeffrey's coattails, and he's joined the Aircraft Association, or the Aeronautic Association. No, he was actually a member of that association in 1909. So somewhere the lad has got, he's got fairly cutting edge in this as well. He's got involved in something fairly new. For context, this looks like, as you mentioned, I've smashed my propeller. I think this is actually the second plane he made. And if you read Wikipedia, it will say, this was the one in which he taught himself to fly, which suggests the first one was the one in which he taught himself to crash. Having stuffed his propeller into a bush or a tree or whatever, that then does get delivered in subsequent letters. But stepping back a bit, this was the initial order. So if I look at the earlier letter, so again, this is the H card of business, this is what it's now got itself into. Somewhere, and I don't have it unfortunately, there is the design from Jeffrey de Havilland for a propeller. Pretty early days. To be made of best mahogany, covenant varnished, bolt holes not to be drilled, makes sense. And again, I hope this will lead to further orders, so putting the carrot out there to incentivise the workers. And in the previous comments, actually having some respect for Jeffrey de Havilland in terms of what he did and how he did it. Please excuse the soil print. He's hands-on. He's not just a name getting the workers to do the stuff. If any of you out there are dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis, you'll recognise this type of letter. Just checking up, if it's not really finished, I prefer it varnished. Well, you've just told us that before, but it sounds like a chaser to me. And then finally, thank you for the propeller received. It seems quite satisfactory, but despite me chasing you for it, my machine is not quite ready for flight. And then, here we go, I will send a check in the course for a few days. 10th and 15th of Feb. 17th of March, I much regret I have not yet been able to send you the check. But he does pay by 20th. The reason I mentioned some of the entrepreneurial points from before is actually, I think de Havilland himself was having cash flow issues as well, not through any fault of his own, but I think he'd sold his second plane onto the balloon factory, or the Royal Aircraft Factory. So he would have been waiting for payment on that, and if he didn't get that, then he couldn't yet afford the £9.15 for the propeller to be manufactured. So that's what I know about that so far. Again, it shows what you can do with a decent chest of tools. And in fact, just thinking about it, the pattern maker's job, the skills there in terms of dealing with curves, I don't know if that made an obvious choice to make propellers, but I don't know how that connection got made to start with, but I'm happy it did. The invitation at the bottom, Claude Graham White, he was also a bit of a flying pioneer. I think he made the first night flight up to York, winner of the Blériot Award, if we want to Google him as well. But at some time later, this was 1912. So it wasn't a sudden job. This was definitely a long-term involvement. So Wilf Carter is invited for a couple of days to an air show, basically by a flying pioneer. And now, here's a few. It's worth a look. In Bench Talk before, we've had sessions where we're purely looking at pictures and reading and inferring from what's in those pictures, what it means for those people. What I take from these, apart from the props themselves, is it's a very standard photo. I think there's some pride and some work there. It's business, it's portfolio. But, you know, we're dressing up for it. We're doing a standard photo in the bottom two, at least a standard location, which does look like a South London house to me. So, yeah, taking some pride, dressing up, doing the right thing. But the thing I did want to point out to people, that one at the top left, that's a beast. I don't know what sort of engine was used to turn that. it made me think even, I don't know if there was a connection between pattern making for marine propellers and actual construction of aircraft propellers themselves. I don't know if that was some jump that we went through at some point. Moving on. Yeah, to pick up that timeline again, this is just a quick summary. Wright Brothers, December 1903, January, February 1911, making propellers for de Havilland, joined the Aeronautical Society before then. Herbert, who was their father, who came down from Haley Hill, died in 31. Bert himself died in 44. But actually, there was a propeller still, I think, in Wilf's loft at home in 1938. There's a letter I've spared you. You had enough letters. Basically from de Havilland saying, thank you very much for telling me. I'd like it very much. Thank you. I have to assume that World War I for Wilf might have been quite busy making propellers. World War II, again, for the family, I'm just told the workshop was used for war work, and Wilf didn't go to war. He was in a reserve occupation, both. I mentioned already, Bert was driving ambulances. Wilf died in 66, and at that point he still had the workshop, although we hear he was pretty much pottering around using it for himself. I don't think the business was active at that point. And around about then must be when my father-in-law John put his hand up and said, no, please don't throw that chest away. I know a lot of furniture from the family is lost. And Wilf was a skilled woodworker, so there was some old style furniture that just looked too old and got thrown away. At least the chest got picked up. Talk about a few things on the tools. I mentioned, I think it's quite probable that there are saws that were, when my wife Justine was growing up, she can remember old saws hanging on the wall. They probably came out of there. If there were flat chisels, straight, regular things that have open paint cans, that's all happened. The other thing, though, given Herbert came down as a pattern maker, started a company with his two sons in a wider workshop, I'm sure what I've got in that chest is a mix. It's some of the pattern maker tools originally, some have gone out elsewhere, some things would come in from other benches. It's a collection of what ended up in that workshop, but it's still, it's a fairly good core set there. 2002, I got the chest, and to be honest, I thought that's nice, that's pretty, I should look at that sometime. It's only really in the last 5 years I've been looking at it in more detail. As I said, some of you have seen me use some of the tools. Many more than I will get to in time. I will restore more. I hope in time to actually repair the chest and get that working a little better as well. Aha! Now, here's something else that was in the chest. If you see those thin wooden templates and wrapped up with a bit of 19th century string, I don't care about those. It's one of those things in hindsight, oh, hang on, if I look at it carefully, top, face and back with a curve with the leading edge. Hang on, that's an airfoil profile. So those are, I think, templates for propellers. And the tools at bottom, they look like outside calipers to me, but were I making a very large, complex 3D shape, those would be extraordinarily useful for me to actually stick them on a beam and be able to measure consistently the outside of something quite chunky. Some of you may have seen those before. Again, I'm here to learn, so you might be able to tell me in a minute. One more thing, which I had found in the trays and never actually thought about until... Oh, it's not going to work now. Come on. There we go. That's in the tills. It's obviously not a working propeller, but it's a handy model. And whether it was proof of concept or someone did that for a laugh, I don't know. But the clues are there. You just need to know what the answer is to recognise what the clue should have been all along. And that is me for now, apart from any Q&A and anything you want to do diving into the tools, which I did promise. If nothing else, I've got quite a few questions myself about things I've found. Lining up for this talk as well as for some thoughts as well, and I've been through the chest again and tidied some stuff up. So yeah, there's some thoughts in my head. But Shrenik and group, back to you.
Thank you very much, Phil.
First.
Thank you. So in the usual form, if anyone has got any questions, pop your name in the chat. See, Matthias has already perked up first, but Chester Chester mentioned that they are trammel calipers.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So over to you, Matthias. There you go.
There we go. Thank you very much, Phil. That was absolutely fascinating in so many ways. First comment, I think the power takeoff you showed a picture of, it reminds me very much of the power takeoff that was on my grandfather's tractor.
Mhm.
That is to say, it was a shaft on the back of the tractor that you could connect to the engine.
Yeah.
And it made the shaft turn, and you could then put a belt on that, or you could connect it with a coupling of some kind to a rotary tool or a tool that needed movement that was hanging from the tractor. So that looked to me like a more mobile form of something that could be connected to a power source that was not rotary, but would turn that power source into rotary power that then could be connected with a belt or a coupling or something to something that needed to be driven.
Non-rotary to rotary. What?
Was it rotary to rotary?
I don't know. I'm trying to imagine what you mean.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the one on the tractor, of course, was rotary to rotary in the sense that you just connected it to the main
Sure.
crankshaft rod or to the main drive shaft of the tractor. Yeah. But here it would probably be connected to some other form. If it was gas related, could have been gas driven and have provided rotary power.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of the takeoff unit, I'm imagining it's this. It looks like a gear stick, that gearbox.
Yeah.
And this piece down here would be. Are you seeing my mouse, by the way?
No, I'm just seeing you. So
the top bit with very obvious truck type.
Yeah.
And the bottom pieces looks like a rotary pump.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, so you say the company folded, you say, in the or was closed down in the 1950s when Wilf died. So there's no, it doesn't exist today, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
No.
And yeah, you saw my father-in-law. He's nothing to do with it. So that
no.
The company died with Wilf really. 66, right. But by 66, his granddaughter says he was basically making wooden spills in the workshop.
Ah, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and there was no other family that wanted to keep it going, or
no. There are other members of the family now who are. There's a couple of guys who are builders. They're very successful, but it's not come anything through that line.
No. Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Over to Chester.
Well, that was a great presentation. Let me just show you. This is another set of trammels. These are
good
outside trammels. Now they're not just outside. You can turn them and just reverse them, and you can use them as inside calipers. Yep. But they are used by. It makes perfect sense for them to be used by a propeller maker because you can use these on any length of bar that you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you could measure the length of the propeller and compare the model to that one, or you can vary going up and down the propeller to make sure that you're following a contour that is suitable all the way down the length of it.
Yes, good. I didn't think to myself that must have been the only time he used it, but yeah, it was a very useful tool, I would think, if you're trying to make a uniform shape.
I understand that you're going back pretty far and supposing that the pattern maker line continues, but they were obviously educated engineers as well. Mm-hmm. And so they had a strong capacity and education about mathematics, geometrics, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so all that put in there, I think it's an interesting story to tell. I have a problem with you referring to the multiple bottoms planes as Corbox plane.
Okay.
I don't believe they are Corbox planes. I do believe that they would be a pattern maker's plane, and they make perfect sense with the production of propellers. So they would be pattern makers' tools in making the model for these propellers, depending on, or producing the propellers fully, not just a model, because you want them, they're sort of like a Cooper's, I think it's called a stomp. They have different contours, so you would be digging out a lot of the contour of that propeller. You follow your inside line to your outside twist, and you have to hog off a lot of materials there. You're not dealing with straight lines. So it makes perfect sense for them to be pattern makers or propeller maker tools, but they're not necessarily Corbox tools, because Corboxes are designed specifically to hollow out a semicircular shape within a core. And the purpose of the semicircle is that the core can be taken apart, the box can be taken apart, leaving the casting in there. And so I would call those pattern makers planes, multi-bottom pattern makers planes, rather than Corbox.
Thanks. I don't have a great stake in either. I'm relaying what I've heard elsewhere. So yeah.
And I have a video on Corbox planes, and I think I mentioned some of that if you want to watch that. But those they all look like really great planes, and I think they do tell an important story. Besides those two things, I don't think that you're making too many errors, and I think there's still a lot more digging to do. And I kind of like the idea that you haven't gone into it and tried to restore it. I think that there might be more lessons to learn. I have a question about the top of the box itself, because it appears that it has 3 revolving cams that are normally fitted for saw handles. You place the saw in it, and it's the shape of the opening in the handle, and then you twist it to hold it up there. But what I'm not seeing is a support for the blade. And so
I can see one bit.
It may have had more than one and changed. So I would want to closely look at that lid to see if there are any holes, old holes of screws or nails that held something that held the blade.
They've changed over time.
Yeah.
I can see one almost a toggle that would just have a slim blade behind it. But
well, and I've thought
exactly, yes, I agree. I can't see an other end for every one of those toggles. Yeah.
And I thought that perhaps the board there might be a support for a blade, but I don't know that that isn't just a patch to repair a crack in the top. I don't know, because
there's plenty of cracks. Yes.
You know, but so it'd be interesting to really examine and photograph the underside of the top of that box and see if there's any evidence of other fixtures that would have held the blades in place, or any discoloration that might point out the shape of the blades. But that's all I have. Still very interesting, and I certainly get the idea of the plane makers' planes. I mean, what goes around comes around. So there you go. Thank you.
Puns within puns.
Thanks, Chester. On to Andy Tuckwell.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree. I mean, you took me in completely with the Planemaker's Tools title. Thank you. So that was but what a lovely find to realise that within the history, we've got this connection right at the beginning of a new high-tech industry. And you don't even have to be a specialist in aviation history to have heard the name de Havilland. Wasn't he something in aeroplanes? Do you know any more about the aunt and a scrapbook? How did that survive? And
the aunt was Wilf's daughter. It's Kathy, the cousin we speak to now. Dorothy died also last year, so we got the last information from her last year. Don't have a great more. There's a couple more pictures from the scrapbook, but there are other letters. So you got all the sexy bits.
That's the real key that unlocks the rest, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
I can make sense of those templates.
I can share your enthusiasm that that's when family history is actually enjoyable and interesting, is when you can see one family as a little microcosm of what was happening in a broader industry across different countries. You know, the whole historical suite is just made up of, you know, a bright boy in Halifax deciding you could do better down in London. Though, I mean, I expect you know, alongside all the textile stuff, Halifax had a huge machine tool industry.
Right.
And there'd have been loads of work for a pattern maker up there at the same time.
Yeah.
And some of that survived into the 20th century, but you could look at catalogues of old woodworking machinery and see name after name.
I didn't have that reason for staying. Yeah, I didn't have that reason for staying in Halifax. That's good fodder. But we have asked ourselves the reverse question, which is, why did he go to London?
But
I think he got into engineering or maintenance a bit. Maybe there was a pattern maker working for that mill. He got into them. Maybe he went down with them, or some of them, or with some others. I don't know.
It's easy to forget just how industrial late Victorian, early 20th century London was. And there's tremendous map resources that you can see that locate what premises used to be, and show the sort of historical concentration of trades in areas that are now just residential, offices, cafes, boring stuff.
I thought you might know that, yes. Whether I want to go fully into that rabbit hole, I don't know. But,
and just to pick up on one of your mystery suggestions, that long gouge.
Oh, yeah.
Couple of thoughts on that. If the narrow stem is sort of central to the cutter, then it could be a big auger bit. In fact, it looks like a nose bit, doesn't it, at the end?
But some clown's mushroomed the top. Someone's been hitting it.
If it's a bit too lightweight for that, I had in a tool chest that I bought very early on, a thing that I thought, that's a funny sort of gouge. What's that doing in there with the woodworking tools? And it was actually a cheese sampler.
Yeah.
And there is a tool that is the same sort of shape as you're handling there, that you can thrust into a big cheese.
Yes.
And it's got that tab at the end that you rotate, so you can take a piece out and see, has it matured properly right inside? It could be that sort of thing that's swapped over because it looks useful. Yeah.
Bill, have you got any cheese? Have you got any cheese lying there?
Not. I mean, I didn't prep that. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. A mission on my part.
So just like taking an old kitchen knife and using it to make a knife, you could think, oh, that will come in handy. I'll sharpen that up and use it.
You remind me. I think I almost wondered at some point, could that be a rotary bit of some sort?
I think it comes down to how central the shaft is to the end.
Yeah.
Can I just point out that Sean might have some bits that arrived today or while he was away, which are about that size.
Stop my enthusiasm.
He's speaking
Yeah,
next. This is my hint to Sean.
Yeah.
Oh, if you want to spotlight me as well, Shronik.
Hey.
Yeah.
There we go.
But I can't get a good pic. Does the bottom look like this?
It looks a lot like that, yes.
I'm just going to revand it so it's a bit bigger. So.
That's a very large nose bit. That's what that is. It's a drill bit.
Yeah.
I got about a half dozen of these. Some of them are huge in the post only this morning, but that's what it is. Right. What it is it's imagine you took the very end off. You have a shell bit like you use for doweling work. This was a sort of an intermediate stage between the shell bit and the auger we know today. That little lip is offset at an angle and it cuts into the bottom of the hole and helps pull it in. It's like a very rudimentary snail.
Yeah. It's very, very slight, isn't it? But yeah, I can see how
very, very slight. To be honest, when I've been using them, I found them to be only a marginal improvement on cutting rate over a plain old shell bit. but these were very common. They came, as you can see, like look over here. They came.
But we know you've got 20. That's fine. I believe you.
They came in massive sizes as well as the smaller ones for dowling work.
Yeah.
What I would be curious is, does the diameter of that bit match the inner diameter of the tap for the screw box?
I think it's bigger, but I can certainly have a look in a minute.
Because if it's close, that might be the drill bit that he had to bore holes to tap. Because one of the things these do is they do drill exceedingly straight, which would make it a good bit to drill a hole before you tapped it with the tap. It's not the screw box you're concerned about, it's the inner diameter.
Yeah, I got it. I know what you're saying.
But
Yeah, diameter.
The second I saw that, I was like, that's a...
I've got no idea what's got V on it, by the way. It's not an easy fit. I think it's too big for that. This is
probably
more than half an inch, and that's more like half an inch, I think.
Yeah, probably doesn't go with it. So it just would have. If the two did line up, then I was thinking, well, you know, you've got the job of that bit. But yeah, nose bits they're not common, but they're not that hard to track down.
I'm not treating any of this as rarity and collector value because it's just interest.
They'd be unusual enough. Not many of them have survived in working order. I think the nose would wear. I think a lot of shell bits you might find might be a completely worn nose bit where they just broke off the tip because it had gotten too shabby.
But keeping them all together tells a great story. So
absolutely.
I think that the value in that is that it's all together.
I'm not entirely convinced that tap fits that box anyway.
Perhaps you should compare the size with the fitting on a propeller or something.
Oh no, let's not get to. It could have been, or it could have been disused since 1885 when he got bored of it. I don't know.
Bored, absolutely. That's a new twist.
I'm on fire. I didn't even realise. There you go.
Andy, did you have anything else?
I just remembered another question I was going to ask, which was...
Come back to you, Sean.
I'd never realised that there was a time when gas was distributed by tanker in liquid form rather than through pipelines in gaseous form. Have I understood that right?
Yeah. It must have been after.
Here and there.
It must have been after 1881.
Yeah, but before the pipelines went in.
Yep.
Wheel it round and pump it out. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, also, gas was delivered to the gas stations by truck. They still are today, but that looks like an older model from the 30s or 40s.
Yes, so we're talking about natural gas.
Well, coal gas.
Or LP, liquid petroleum.
Yeah, exactly. Coal gas or natural gas.
Yeah.
For lighting and cooking.
I was just quite impressed they actually had condensate. They have compressed it, condensed it. That's high pressure.
Well, that's why I asked
Cool.
LP. LP is a different density than natural gas.
Yep.
Or MAP.
Different BTU. It has different BTU content per cubic foot.
Yeah.
So
they
deliver.
The information I could find on the Reading Gas Company was from 1820, which seems very early. They had street lighting, and whether one of those trucks was pumping every single street lamp with, I don't know. And then that came along later. There is still a Reading Gas Company if you look it up, but don't bother. It just sells fireplaces. It won't tell you much.
Anything else, Andy?
I'll shut up and let somebody else talk.
Okay.
Andy, was I correct in attributing you to be the mystery Andy T of UK Workshop?
Yeah, that's me.
Had to be you.
And was that the monk iron that you were talking about?
No, that was the Thomas Underwood dealers.
Oh, well, have a look in the chat. There's a link to a discussion that Andy Brown remembered, saying, haven't we seen this monk iron before? And it turns up, somebody called Ed65 back in 20.
Okay. I'll have a look. I've got enough windows open as it is. I've got too many things going on.
Identical 3 stars monk stamp. Nobody got anywhere with a positive ID, but I did find at the time that there was a Monk Bridge Iron and Steel Company in Leeds. But,
Possible. Yeah.
It's
I was
on at
quite
least
intrigued by
plane
the,
irons.
I was quite intrigued by the number of other, the Millard and the A House, just some in Clapham Junction, some in Kentish Town Road. I know there used to be a lot of tool makers around. You know, medieval times there used to be a lot of tool makers around the city. The fact that someone's doing it out of there.
There certainly would have been irons marked for retailers as well.
Did
There is
that,
actually a-
did that iron the mark in the photo? Did the iron mark match that monk with the 3 asterisks above it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting when you blow it up, the facets of the lettering is very coarse. It's really interesting looking.
It's been hit with a big hammer, hasn't it?
Well, no, I think it's actually the way they carved it in. If you blow it up, the facets in the K, the way the lines go back, and the serifs as well, it's almost a little crude, which is nice.
It certainly is. Look at it again. Where did I get to?
You share your picture again?
I will do. I'm just. Did I stop sharing?
There is actually a monk plane.
Oh, but that was MUNK.
Ooh.
No? What was it? MUNK.
It's coming right now.
It's been
So this is the different iron to the one that was on UK Workshop.
Yeah, it's those asterisks now. The top one's slightly offline, isn't it? So
Yeah, and there's a single one above that middle one. So, or is that just rust that we're looking at? It looks like it might be a
I
separate.
can find it in a minute and have a good look on that.
Because if I remember in the discussion that it was although the asterisks were actually hiding something underneath. Oh, I've got that wrong. I can't remember that far.
Stolen from. Do this. I'll see what I can find.
Somebody getting beaten up?
Yeah, me. Wrestling with the tool chest. All right, that one is. There you go. What can you see there?
Sorry, Phil, need to stop your screen share.
Oh, it's taking your whole screen.
There we go.
Yeah, in the one that's on the website that Andy posted, it's definitely hiding an arched mark above the monk. If you blow it up, you can see there's an arched mark.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on a moment. I'm just pulling them both up onto one slide, so you can see them.
Yeah, almost as if monk was, well, the monk looks hard to say.
So if you have a look at this, I've just used Bill's slides, but I've put them on one. So
yeah, offset of that center asterisk in the photo bucket one is an arched mark, and there's some lettering above that, above the K in bucket. Just above that line, you see something.
oh, there's a little mark there. You can also see there's some sort of mark up there as well.
It looks like a double.
I'm not seeing any more on this one. So
You are seeing it or not?
I'm not seeing any more on my one here.
So above the 3 stars, is there another little mark?
Yeah, there's another mark.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Well, you can see that on this photo. You can see it on the presentation. There's another asterisk above.
Yeah, just
the
that.
middle one.
And
But nothing else above that. That's what I'm saying.
It could be shadows that we're seeing above his. Interesting though.
Yeah.
Rightmost star looks bigger.
It does.
I think the mark above might be the letters AM.
I'll put it back up again. Actually, hold on a moment. I'm going to make
Oop.
that. I'm going to make it a bit better. So it's much larger. And we can really.
It's hard to tell whether the monk is raised or it's incised. I'm assuming it's incised. Phil, is the monk raised or is it incised? Is it stamped in?
It looks very much stamped.
Stamped in. Okay, so that would make sense that it could be put on top of another maker's iron. If it's raised, then that would most likely not be the case. Yeah.
No, I mean, you've
Yeah.
seen this. How much can you see of me?
So you kind of see something just above the right asterisk, sort of an arched lettering, little lettering in there behind that other asterisk. It could be.
I know what you mean. On the picture, it's more difficult to see. In this case, the photo is actually better than reality. Yeah. Okay, I'll try and clean it more, and we'll see what we come back with.
All I'm seeing is a little hat here. Nothing more than that. Same here. Just a little hat there.
Could it be a crown?
Maybe.
I think what it's telling us really is that it's a commercial job. It's not an owner's mark. It's not a company,
it's
company ownership. It's not like putting Great Western Railway on it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps Monk bought their irons for their planes from someone else, and then
Bought the business.
Yeah.
Sounds more like it to me.
Yeah. Now the question is whether or not there are any Monk planes that are known of.
So
no, and I don't think this is presumably a Monk plane because that iron is Monk, that is Hibernia, and I've only got two, so I think it's just mix and match.
Yeah,
so
that's why I wonder about these. I mean, it's not unique for being made in two pieces. I do wonder if these were somewhat user made or a startup plane maker who basically made these things in two halves and glued them together.
Now, that's a common way pattern makers make planes.
Right, yeah, but we would make their own rather than a plane maker would make them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
You could maybe try
Mythos
putting
just pointed
a
out
rubbing
that
on it.
Does anybody know of any history of a Monk hardware that purchased irons and then sold them under their own name to woodworkers as just irons, selling them separately?
Sure, someone's already done it, but I'm just going to pull up Planemakers.
I think it's a no.
No. Yeah.
Right.
Certainly, neither other Andy or I found anything in 2015.
Well, there was the Monks planes in Monks and Son, Sheffield, patent 1511, 16th of January 1884.
But wasn't that MUNK?
Unless
there's nothing in Planemakers on MONK.
I'll put MON.
No, it's MU. I found there was a whole correspondence about it in the Woodworker. There was somebody saying it was a great, wonderful thing, and other people saying it's a pile of rubbish.
There's nothing on MUNK either in Planemakers.
Well, it'll probably be in the 4th edition.
It's in the.
That was the 4th edition I was looking at.
Sorry, the 5th edition, I mean. Yeah.
Oh, I love the 5th edition.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's Dimension. Sorry.
I think that's where you'll find it. Yeah.
In Pete Ample as well, volume 2.
So Mitho just pointed out something on the mark, that the one on the right, the photo bucket
that
one,
comment, yeah.
looks a bit closer together. I think it's just been stamped deeper.
If you look at it, you can actually see that the Monk is very, very deep. The 3 stars above it is not so deep, and the top star is actually only just visible.
Yeah. Which suggests to me that when it was stamped, maybe the stamp was at a slight angle.
Yeah.
Or it was 3 separate stamps.
I wonder if it isn't actually 8 separate stamps.
Could be.
No,
Somebody going at it. Well, there is the differential spacing, possibly.
I think it's fair to say that whoever had the job of stamping the name on the iron was more motivated to get it done quickly than anything else. I would never expect his work to be inspected in this level of detail.
Anyhow, all I know that this is not in whatever solar plane it is, and I've got base.
Yeah.
There's the matches, and I've got two matching irons and bases, and the rest are.
I mean, there's a comparison with the similar style of plane in the Warrington chest.
So that's
not actually a complete set of the curved irons to match the curved bodies in there, and some of them have been cut down. And at least one, I think, was a substandard iron where the name had been obliterated at some quality control stage, maybe. And it seems natural. You're making a tool for yourself. You're not going to go out and spend money if there's something that can be scrounged around the workshop.
I did even wonder if you'd regrind the irons now and again to fit the different bases to go at it.
Yeah, why not? I mean, wouldn't take very long.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'll have to do if I ever want to use them. All right.
Anything else, Andy?
I'll shut up again because I keep talking.
Okay. I don't see any other names in the chat, so I'm gonna jump on with my question, and that was about the scraper. I think it was really one of the. I don't. Why did I replace?
I mentioned it. Yep.
So the scraper, was it a 3 square file that's been turned into a scraper?
There's a file. It is
a flat file.
Let me try and swap camera. Trying to catch it.
Just going to remove my spotlights because that's a big.
Suddenly all look at my nose instead.
Oh,
does that help? Just slightly better camera.
Tiny bit.
Almost. Oh, it's tapered on both sides.
That's.
I was thinking a cut-off tool, but it's not actually tapered enough.
I think it's an engineer's scraper.
Yeah, completely standard way of making them. Grind an old file.
Yep. Yeah. But just to have that as a bearing surface at an angle there.
Yeah, because you're only using the tip to cut.
Yeah.
And you don't angle it back. You can't hold the file at a suitable angle to make it cut. You've got to lift it.
I'm with you.
Up about.
I know what you mean. So the effective angle is like that.
No.
It's
No.
up.
Yeah, okay, a bit higher.
No. Much more. That's roughly 30 degrees.
Yeah.
Right.
That'll
So
cut
you just want clearance there.
Yeah. It's literally just the corner that's pushing. So you want the angle to be able to push down and actually cut into the metal.
Yep. That's okay. It was only doing this the other day. I realised I looked down and saw it was a file that had been repurposed rather than something else.
It's a scraper.
So that's probably one of Bert's, unless it's for cleaning up whatever comes out of the far end of the pattern making process. But when I first saw it, I thought a blunt chisel, but it's not. Engineer scraper, yeah, that makes sense. But again, Bert was the machinist and the engineer. Okay, right, we'll put that one aside. That one's done.
Anyone else got any questions?
Yeah. I've got some.
Yeah, go for it.
Pretty dark. Paint spattered. No stamps. Could that be another pattern maker's own made? Heavy.
I'll step in first and say I think most chariot planes are entirely unmarked anyway.
Right.
I think it's a part of the charm of them that they come at you not as things that exist in catalogues that can be sort of priced for their rarity. You've got to judge the object in front of you like you would a piece of handmade furniture.
Yep. But it's got
it does look a rather nice one.
Oh, could you pop the iron out? It looks quite thin at the top end.
It is finished, and some clown's been thumping it. You can, see?
Yeah.
See the mushroom on that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
I can. I brought an iron hammer in for that reason. I was moving. Oh, broken it. There you go. One. Blade. There's some embarrassing corrosion in this, I realise. I need to do something with it. Let me have a look under the light. Or does this light cause you guys trouble? Hang on.
There you go.
Does that cause you flickering trouble?
No.
oh, it's fine.
Too bright there. There you go. So not much. Oh, there you go. Should recognise that.
If you turn it, put it vertical.
Right, you should recognise the shapes. It's pattern recognition training. Well, I'm relying on you. I can't read it from this side.
I don't. What
No.
is that? Isaac Greaves?
It is Isaac Greaves, yes.
Yeah.
The crown.
Quite an early one.
The thing is, the bed on this is a little bit ratty as well. It's a wooden bed. Sorry, wooden infill of the bed, and it's. Let me see. Yeah.
Sorry.
Not perfect, and I think you saw a lump of that stuck to the back of the blade. Actually, need some careful cleaning where I minded.
Is there some paper on the bed?
Yes.
Yeah, I found I've got one infill where someone had packed out the bed with paper because the wood had shrunk and
Yep.
the bed had come back behind the metal, which meant that it needed to be packed out, otherwise there wasn't a full mating surface,
Yeah.
which is probably what they've done there.
Yeah. A little bit of damage. I don't think this was me in my early years, but you see that chipping on the end of that, which I could probably just round over and put some more.
What were these planes used for? I'm not familiar with them at all.
Don't ask me, I'm just holding it.
Not too dissimilar to a block plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think they must have been used for the same things that you've used a block plane for, and were ousted by the very, very cheap, very good early Stanley block planes. But I was trying to find anything more about them a while ago, and there's almost nothing that I know of written about them, comparing them. And I don't think there will be, apart from photo galleries, because there's so little to go on.
Yeah.
But
so
also, while you're showing us that does remind me to say that lovely set of hollows and rounds. I'm so glad that you've not cleaned all the black off them, because that's so beautifully illustrative of where the hands go.
Yeah, yeah.
And on the triplane too.
They've had a gentle linseed oil and terps wash. Some of it, mostly so I can get the stamps.
But lovely to see them all lined up together.
Fleet,
as they always have been. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep going. All right.
There's another question from Paul.
If few of them are ever stamped, then what would they be? A small run from a small kitchen table Planemaker? Or could they be knocked out by Varvel or someone else like that, or Marples, and just not stamped?
If he was a pattern maker, he probably persuaded the foundry to.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, to make one for him.
That to me looks
reminded me so much of. I'm saying that was the first thing I got to grips with in the chest because I wanted one.
Yeah.
Use one.
Likewise, that I bet that's.
Precisely, yeah. That was an early connection from reading about pattern makers, bench talk discussions, the Warrington chest book. Recognizing that pattern makers would certainly get these sorts of things made.
I'm amazed that you've resisted bringing out all of these tools in front of us in the past.
What was the length of that chariot plane, Phil?
Hang on, Chester. I'll do it in inches if you prefer.
Sure. There's an Irish pattern version. It's longer than most. So 5.
That's not doing that bigger. Just shy of 5.
Yeah.
I was just going to say with the Irish pattern, it was really common for cabinet makers to just buy the casting and do all the fit and finish themselves and put it together. So it certainly wouldn't be beyond the. Maybe that's what he did. It certainly wouldn't have been beyond the skill set to just make his own.
Yeah, or copy someone's. Because I thought about, okay, my mate's got a router, I'll go and copy it. But actually, you'd need to make a pattern with expansion or contraction factored in as well, so you wouldn't just cast that.
You do see copies of router planes where they're small, clearly smaller than what they were copied
Oh,
from.
okay. For that reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But this was the first thing I did get going. Yeah. You see the end of the hard life there? That's not a blade I've tried to use. I'll leave that for posterity. I was interested, A, the size of it, B, the tiny, tiny handles, and C, the fact if it is a user made or a user copy, it's still got holes for a subbase. So it's sort of like a semi-commercial version. You know, you can adapt it to what you need.
Looking at the handles, can you see if they match perfectly, they could be cupboard door handles?
yeah. Could well be. What you mean, not turned in situ?
I don't think they do match perfectly.
No, the base one looks sharper on the
Yeah,
edge.
And I mean, and anyway, a pattern maker should be able to make a couple of handles.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah. This one is slightly
more rounded.
There's more of an
slightly
edge
more
on
rounded at the base, and it's a hair narrower than the other one.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's probably just, if they look the same from both directions, then yeah. To answer your question, Tronic, why didn't I get them out earlier? It's taken me a while to realise what I had, really.
No, I'm just, even in the last few months, it's just amazing that you've resisted saying anything.
Keep your powder dry.
Yeah.
Make sure you know your facts first.
So Paul's got another question.
So Phil, I saw there was a Halifax connection.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, great talk from what I saw of it. Unfortunately, I missed the start of it. It is, it's been recorded, thank God. So I can watch it again. But have you actually been down to Halifax?
No, I have not.
Halifax is about quarter of an hour's drive for me.
Oh yeah. No, you were going to get a reference, but it would have been cheeky earlier.
If you gave me some things, I don't mind going down there and taking some photographs for you of the area.
Well, actually, Paul, I might be in your neck of the woods in a week or three. Why don't we talk about this again? So,
sure.
Might be a good reason to, because we'll be with my mother-in-law, who obviously has the family, married into that family link, so we'll be around and about. Yeah.
I might not be. I might be down south.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
But please, get in touch.
Think about that.
Taking the mother-in-law out to Carlton Screw.
Sorry, Andy?
You're taking the mother-in-law out to Carlton Screw.
All right.
Not as far as I know. We've got 4 days in a place we've rented. Somewhere. I think it's a landmark trust, interesting property. That's the point. It's
Cool.
As I say, if you send me the details,
Yeah, I'll have a look at the census and see. Yeah, I've got census data, so I think I can find. I think I've in fact seen someone who has tried to translate the tiny, tiny scrawl from the photocopy of the census. You can find out where they are. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. Well, if you're down here anyway, you probably want to see it with your own eyes.
Well, possibly, but anyway, let me get in touch for various reasons about I think it's about the 18th of next month. We might be there.
Yeah, it would be. Smack bangers to when I'm not around.
She's in Bromley the week after. You can go and see her if you want.
In Bromley?
No, don't worry. Okay.
All right. I think this really shows what Bench Talk's about. we're all making connections between each other and helping each other out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Phil. You haven't got any more questions?
If we dried up, can I? There is a question I must ask.
Yep. There you go.
Never answer questions without having questions yourself. The improved contraction rule has a standard side, and on the back it's got brass and iron. That makes sense. This end intrigues me. Why is it like that? Because on one side, the standard feather edge rule.
It's to identify the true side of measurements, possibly, and the contraction measurement side.
What, by relevance to that?
Yeah, because one will be.
Yeah, but the contraction side is actually the flat side. The true side is the feather edge. I don't know.
So
I had a moment and thought, aha, it's because they're different lengths, because it's a contraction. But actually, either the contraction side or the real side must be wrong on that bit. Has anyone ever seen that before?
No, and I have several shrink rules, and they don't have that.
Maybe that's because it's improved.
Does the brass actually cover the end of the rule on the stepped in?
Not entirely. You see the feather edge there just breaks through at the front.
No, end on.
Yeah, end on.
Well, yes, it does cover end on, yes.
Oh, so it's deliberate then.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're thinking it might.
And that's the other end, which is normal.
Is that the shorter end, or is it the? Sorry, is that the zero end?
It's the 24 end.
Sorry.
That's the 24 end.
But then it wouldn't make a difference.
No, I agree. It's not going to offset your measurements. I just wonder why it's there.
But what is the actual length end to end of the over the larger length?
24 inches plus or minus expansion. So that there looks like 24 on the regular side.
Do you have a maker on that?
Yes, I did. I put it in the PowerPoint. I need to squint and find it myself. But it's made in London, Pimlico.
Green.
Green, yes, green.
Could it have had anything to do with being able to latch on a second part?
There's no pin.
I mean, not the physical connection, but just so that the edges would align.
You'd stack them, yeah, okay, yes.
So, Phil, your 24 is shown on both steps.
Let me see.
So you've got your shrinkage 24 and you've got your standard 24 identified by one long section and one short section.
Working on that, hang on.
So it's a quick way of referencing.
So it'll show you on your numbers.
Yeah, but I'm squinting to see the numbers. So this is the conventional side. There's a 23 there, and there are numbers here. I just can't read them properly yet. Yeah.
I think Andy's saying you could count the numbers from either end, whichever was convenient, and you can only achieve that by having the two scales on physically different length pieces of wood.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was thinking earlier, but actually,
that way they can both be 24 inches long.
Well, that works for this side because that's got the iron and brass contraction on this side. So one is going to contract more. So it makes sense that they would be different. They are different. But then on the conventional side, the imperial side, something between this or that must be wrong.
No,
Are you sure that's how it works? Have you measured the inches?
Yeah.
With
If you turn it round, Phil.
Have we?
Turn it over. Sorry.
That way?
That way, yeah. Now progress and show us the end of the stepped end.
Stepped end is.
Yeah. Okay. So you see 23 and 23
Yep.
don't line up.
Agreed.
Now, if you look at 24, will be the long bit on that scale, and 24 will be the short bit on that scale. So there, that identifies your iron contraction, and the other one identifies you. So when he's using that rule, if he hasn't got that reference, he could easily get the wrong one. It's a visual identification that one is the longer scale and one is the shorter scale.
Okay. So the fact it's actually incorrect.
That's why it don't matter.
Doesn't matter, yeah. Yeah.
Because that's not not working.
But never mind the facts. No one has ever seen it before. Is that right?
No.
Wow.
No. You just missed it. If you only had done this last week, I could have asked Mick the rule yesterday.
Hello. One for next time. Right, I'll keep going. I think it's about Christmas, so I've only got one more. Amongst the 6 and 8 in-canal and out-canal gouges, there's this one. Does that work for you at all? It is approximately 1/8 of an inch. My question is, how the bloody hell am I going to sharpen it?
Carefully.
My needle files aren't that small. It's tiny. I don't need one.
Abrasive paper on a very thin slip of wood.
I know, yeah. Or even just abrasive paper folded in half would be enough abrasive for that. But yeah, I don't think I need to use it, so I probably won't do it. But
it might work to round over the corner of the slipstone. To that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I think I did actually have a go with that just for interest's sake. Yeah. I was just amazed how I'm not surprised at that small a tool. I was just then thinking, okay, how does anyone actually sharpen the damn thing? Anyway, I'll put that back in its rightful place.
Were there any sharpening tools in the toolbox?
No. Well, the saw files, which I think are saw files, not just triangular files.
More stones, yeah.
No stones. They would have been strewn around the workshop somewhere else. Again, I think it's a. You've seen the engineered scraper, so I think there's something got lumped into this from the machinist's corner of the workshop, and a load of other stuff has just been used. Either it got mixed up in the workshop, or it became useful DIY fodder in the last 60 odd years. It wasn't me. I put it all back.
It's just nice that it survived. It's being looked after, though.
Yeah. And I think the family is now well aware. Okay, well, not being too morbid, but where's it going to go next? I mean, it's a thing worth keeping together, and it is a thing that I have used. I have used the scribing gauges. I have used the hollows and rounds. That's right, gouges.
So, is your next woodworking project going to be a fella?
It's a bit curvy. No, I'm not making. Well, I've got a small one. No, I'm going to stick to cabinets until I'm bored of cabinets. Curves look difficult.
You could build a flying cabinet.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
On that note,
back to Chester's point, I did wonder when I looked at the tools first, and I evolved all those what ifs. Okay.
You could have one in the back of a workshop as a prop.
I did wonder if those looked more modern, if they got into that later, and maybe it did match up with prop production years, because it does look kind of different to the Larville 1870, 1880 vintage. Anyway.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. It's been amazing. I am very curious about some of those tools in the tool chest, and when you find out exactly,
I came for answers.
a bit more history. It'll happen over time, and I look forward to hearing snippets in the future talks as well. Thank you very much, and I guess it's time to raise a toast to the bench.
And to Phil.
Cheers to Phil. Cheers to the bench.
Phil to the bench.
Phil to the bench.
Phil.
Cheers, Phil. That was most enjoyable.
Good. Welcome. About my turn.